The Raiders have given head coach Josh McDaniels and general manager Dave Ziegler the pink slip. They have officially been fired. Do you know how bad of a head coach and GM you have to be to get fired at 1 a.m. in the freaking morning? Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler turned what was a playoff team into one of the biggest abominations in the National Football League. They kicked Derek Carr, the longtime franchise quarterback of this organization, to the curb. They said, Derek, you're not good anymore. Pack your shit and get out of town. They didn't even let him finish the season with the franchise that drafted him for the city that he loved. And then they trade away tight end Darren Waller to the New York Giants for a flat soda and a stale bag of Fritos. This was an awful hire by the Las Vegas Raiders. And a couple of years ago, when they made this hire, I got a lot of pushback because I said that Rich Bisaccia should have been named the full-time head coach. It made no sense that Rich Bisaccia, who was the interim head coach, was able to help that team turn their season around, go to the wild card round, and nearly beat the Cincinnati Bengals. And yet, he doesn't get the opportunity to be the full-time head coach. They just go ahead and they give it to Josh McDaniels. You see, there's an old saying that goes, you don't need somebody to show you twice what they already showed you once. And what Josh McDaniels showed us before was that he wasn't a good head coach. He was awful with the Denver Broncos, and he was awful being the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. How are you an offensive-minded coach, but yet you can't get none of your wide receivers more than 2 catches against the Detroit Lions? What the fuck was the point of trading for Devontae Adams if you're not going to find a way to get him involved? You signed Jimmy Garoppolo in free agency, which at best you thought could have been a marginal move. Going from Derek Carr to Jimmy G, most people thought was a lateral move, but instead, looking back on it a couple of months later, it was a downgrade. Derek Carr looks way better with the Saints than what Jimmy Garoppolo has looked with the Las Vegas Raiders. Jimmy Garoppolo looks worse now than what he ever did with the San Francisco 49ers. You want to know why? Because of bad coaching. And now that I think about it, I think that Derek Carr was playing bad due to bad coaching. Because look at how Jimmy G has played this year. Josh McDaniels is just one of those guys that isn't cut out to be a head coach. You have certain guys who come into this league who are just good coordinators, and they're not meant to be head coaches. And this is another failed head coach from the Bill Belichick coaching tree. Let's think about it. Who has been the most successful head coach to ever come from coaching under Bill Belichick? Who? Brian Flores? And even then, he didn't last long when he was the head coach of the Dolphins. Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler, they made terrible draft picks. Tyree Wilson already looks like a bust. Like, is there any rookie or second-year player that has looked promising up to this point for the Las Vegas Raiders that McDaniels or Ziegler have drafted? The free agency signings haven't really been that great. They haven't improved the offensive line. This hire was a complete disaster on all levels, and now the Raiders are back to the drawing board. But if you're a fan of this organization or this team, this isn't new to you because you've been going through the same bullshit for nearly 2 decades and some change. You wonder when the Raiders are ever going to get it right. Now, at least on the bright side, you're going to have the opportunity to get either Caleb Williams or Drake May, who, if you pair them along with the right head coach, maybe you give them a Jim Harbaugh or a Ben Johnson or a Lou Anarumo, and you sign some good free agents and have a solid drive class, maybe you could compete for the playoffs next season in 2024. But Josh McDaniels just was a complete disaster as the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. His offenses stunk. He got Derek Carr kicked out of town because he felt like he wasn't a good fit in his system. But Jimmy G looks even worse than what Derek Carr looked. So who really was the problem? Was it Josh McDaniels or was it Derek Carr? I think we have to say it was Josh McDaniels because although Derek Carr hasn't looked all that great with the Saints, he's looked way better than what Jimmy G has looked this season with Las Vegas. It's just so disappointing to see a team that at one point had a very promising future get that all ruined and thrown in the trash due to bad head coaching, bad free agency acquisitions, and bad draft selections. Do you know that the Raiders attempted to trade up for the first overall pick in this past year's draft, but they felt like the Chicago Bears were asking for too much? Imagine if the Raiders would have been able to pull that trade off and they had Bryce Young or CJ Stroud or even Anthony Richardson. I mean, this franchise right now, they have no direction. They have no vision. And I wonder who's going to be the next head coach. Are they going to be able to lure Jim Harbaugh away from Michigan? Because it looks like with that sign stealing scandal that is going on with Michigan, the university rescinded his recent contract offer. It looks like Jim Harbaugh is going to be back in the NFL, and he probably could be the next head coach of the Raiders. But if you don't land him, who else are you going to go after? It's not like this team doesn't have talent. They got a really good group of wide receivers. It's just that Josh McDaniels didn't know how to give them the damn football. And I thought that Josh McDaniels would have gotten fired after they lost to Tyson Bagent and the Chicago Bears. Tyson Bagent, do you know what he was doing a year ago? He was playing Division II football. He was an undrafted rookie free agent, and he balled out against the Las Vegas Raiders. That's the sign of a terrible head coach. The Raiders' offense never at one point ever looked elite. That's another red flag that you have a terrible head coach. Second chance head coaches don't work out in the NFL all too often. The only second chance head coaches that I can recall off the top of my head actually having success have been Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll. Other than that, most of these second chance head coaches end up failing. Look at Ron Rivera with the Washington Commanders. He's possibly going to be the next head coach to get the pink slip. Look at Todd Bowles with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dennis Allen with the Saints. Second chance head coaches just aren't good. Hell, Frank Wright with the Carolina Panthers. Another example. The only time a second chance head coach possibly could work is if you get a Doug Peterson, somebody who didn't really fail during his time with his previous stops. It just was that his time kind of ran out and he needed a change. Same thing with Andy Reid. When you have an accomplished head coach that actually knows what it takes to build a championship caliber team, those are the coaches that are worth giving second chances to. Not a coach in Josh McDaniels who already had a losing record prior to being a head coach with the Raiders. In the same division when he was coaching the Denver Broncos. The Raiders have been doing the same thing for over the last 2 decades. It's been rinse, wash, and repeat. They hire a coach, they fire a coach, they bring in another one, and they fire him. Eventually, you got to wonder, when are they finally going to bring in the right guy? Because they've been at this thing for 2 decades. I've been alive for 21 years, going on 22. And I've been watching the NFL for 12 years, and I can only recall the Raiders being good twice in my whole entire lifetime watching football. That was that one season when Derek Carr had that MVP year and he got his back snapped in half. And then when they were able to make it to the postseason and nearly beat the Bengals with Rich Bisaccia. And I was telling people a couple years ago when I got a lot of pushback for criticizing this hiring that Rich Bisaccia should have been the head coach instead of Josh McDaniels. He took your team to the postseason, and you were nearly a goal line stop away from being able to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. That wild card round loss that the Raiders had in 2021 to Cincinnati came down to a goal line stand where Cincinnati's defense was able to get the stop and win that game. I never really got the logic of not making Rich Bisaccia the full-time head coach. And although he hasn't gotten any other head coaching opportunities, that doesn't mean that he isn't head coach material. It's crazy how he had more success not even being the head coach for a full season than what Josh McDaniels ever had being the head coach for, what, a season or 2 seasons and a half? The draft picks have been awful. Like, are there any promising draft selections that Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler made that have promising futures? I mean, Tyree Wilson right now looks like a bust. Michael Mayer, you can't even find ways to get him involved. You gave up all this capital to get Devontae Adams, and you can't get him more than 1 or 2 catches. Josh McDaniels was an awful hire by the Las Vegas Raiders. I never was a believer in this hire. I never thought that Josh McDaniels was going to be able to turn things around. And Raiders fans kept telling me, man, you got to give him time. You got to give him time. Like, why do I need to give you time when before you took the job, this was a playoff team with the interim head coach? I was surprised that Josh McDaniels wasn't fired sooner. If I was Mark Davis, I would have kicked his ass to the curb and gave him his walk-in papers and told him to clean out his damn office after they lost the fucking Tyson Badgett, an undrafted rookie free agent quarterback on the worst team in the National Football League, led by Matt Eberflus. That was embarrassing. This whole entire tenure of Josh McDaniels being the head coach of Las Vegas has been embarrassing. If you're a Raiders fan, let me know what you guys think about Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler's tenure as the head coach and general manager of the Las Vegas Raiders, and who would you like to be the next head coach of this football team? Before you leave, make sure that you check out the JT Sports Podcast. We are not just a YouTube channel. Every video that's uploaded on the channel is available in audio format on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Leave a like and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we go live and upload new content. And I will see you guys later with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast.